Hey Collective, it's Al, and welcome back to the channel. I actually wanted to address something specific today. I was actually enjoying my day. I'm actually working on something that's coming out this week that's going to be like really a big deal. But I wanted to take a break for a minute and kind of, because I was reading the book, Prayer Can Change Your Life. And so I want to make sure that I give them credit because it's an incredibly wonderful turn of phrase that came from the book that I'm about to talk about. But I always want to make sure that I cover legalese and all that stuff. So it's written by William R. Parker and Elaine St. John's, and the book is really, really powerful. It's a really great book, and it talks about how to pray properly and how that can change your life. And so it goes through all these studies and things like that. So let me give them proper credit. But within the book, something that caught my attention and made me kind of chuckle was a turn of phrase that I thought would be very worthwhile for the collective, which was the will to fail. And so what they were referring to with the will to fail was actually kind of fascinating. It's that it takes a little effort to do this, but some people are determined to fail in the sense that they allow their ego to limit their ability to try for things because they understand that they're like the drinker or the dreamer or the person who dreams but doesn't put action into their motion. They're people who allow a passivity to make them almost unconscious and eventually leads them to almost extinction because they just stop trying to live life because there's always something else taking responsibility away from them and disempowering them. And so it's called the will to fail, and I thought this was a very interesting way of saying it. And so essentially what they're talking about is that many of us in human condition while we're here have this tendency to talk ourselves out of things because we would rather fail than try at all. Because when you fail, when you don't try at something, which is the will to fail, you are allowing your ego to stay intact, and that was their point. And I thought that was really powerful. So the will to fail allows us the ability to have our ego stay intact, right? And so it really talks to the human condition and the disconnect between the higher self, the soul, and then the formal body part that we represent as the shadow to the soul. And I thought it was very fascinating that people would do that. And I realized I can't say anything negative about it because I totally have done it in my lifetime too. Personally speaking, I remember when I used to be younger, I always had this thing where my self-esteem was okay, but we've talked about this. Like I like a different textured look to my partner, whatever it is. It can be like eyes, dark hair, albino white, whatever it is that makes it a variable for my own appearance. And it's not that I look down at myself. It's just that I see myself every day, and my attraction is to something that I don't see every day, right? And so I used to do this thing where I would prefer to just allow people to come to me, no matter how much I was attracted to someone else. And I realized as an adult, now that I'm older and now that I'm ascending, I realize how much time I wasted in that passivity because I never accomplished what I wanted to say in those time frames or what I wanted to do in those time frames because I allowed the fact that I prefer my ego to stay intact so that no one said no to me or that I wasn't rejected or that I didn't have heartbreak or that any of that. Because then my ego, as low vibrational as this sounds, would stay complete and it wouldn't be hurt in any way, shape, or form. But now, as an ascendant, I can tell you straight up, like, that doesn't make sense to me anymore. And so I wanted to share with you guys why. Because you can't grow from that. If you live in stagnation, it's like living in a pool of puddle. And it's just sewage and stuff like that. You're just stewing in your own juices. You're not raising your vibration. You're stuck in whatever victimization that caused you to be in that little pool. And so, like, let's say you got divorced and you never got over it, or you had a miscarriage and you never got over that, or somebody did something violent to you and you're never able to disconnect from that. We've talked about that. That's really toxic because then you're stuck with the same vibration as the person who did the damage to you, right? But as long as we stay in there, at least our ego doesn't risk any more damage to itself. And though the soul is probably screaming at us going, what the hell are you doing? You're never going to accomplish anything while you dream. To dream without action is to basically, be asleep. And nobody wants to be asleep in a life that you're supposed to be present for every day. And so that statement of the will to fail just caught my attention and it just brought my life up because I was just like, I've done that. Everybody in the world does that. We all would rather not try because we know that there's a risk that we will fail. But as someone who has failed a lot, I've never stopped trying. And I was thinking about the last post I made about the fact that the divine masculines are going through this thing right now. Sorry, my hair is distracting me. Where they're going through this whole thing where their ego is being dismantled and how this might be the perfect time to break that will to fail. Because let's say that you're going through the dismantling and you're like You're a masculine that used to look down your nose at women. I don't know anybody that's like this, so I'm just saying a generalistic thing. But let's say that you looked down at women your entire life because you had an issue with your mom. Mom was overpowering and just, I don't know, like whatever the unhealthy situation was there. But you looked down your nose at women, and suddenly now you find yourself looking at the fact that you're alone. You have probably a lot of money, but no one that actually cares about you. People are very greedy, and they don't appreciate you. Whatever the situation is, but you're more comfortable in that two-faced environment where there's drama and pettiness and people are all money hungry, because you would rather that than risk your heart being broken by finding someone who will call your shit and actually you can fall in love with. Like, you see what I'm saying? Because that's the will to fail. You would rather be in an uncomfortable situation that you're used to, where you look down your nose at the opposing sex if you're straight, or look down your nose at the effeminate version if you're gay, and you would rather be like that because you feel like your ego is the dominant alpha male. But when you identify yourself as an alpha, omega, beta, or whatever you identify you're judging people, and so you're not allowing them to breathe any more than you're able to breathe. And so what I'm saying though is that will to fail will prevent you from ever trying to go after who? Another alpha. If you're an alpha, you would never dare approach another alpha. You would always go rather for the kill, which would be a beta or an omega. Well, the omega, I always tell people, be careful with the omegas, because the omegas are alphas. They're just humorous about it. They have chosen to be secondary. I always say like this: where there's a king, there's a queen. Typically, the queen will prefer to be the omega, because that means that she doesn't have to go to war, right? Like, she's not all about the war, but she's about cutting people's heads off if she needs to. You know what I mean? But there's like a difference where you put the face, and then there's the brain. Not everybody has the two in them, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's someone that stands behind with the power, and the person in front has their own power, but there's usually someone who's more demure and wants to be behind. But we all know that, if I always say this joke, wherever there's a man, there's a woman behind the man who's going, I don't think that's why. It's like the conscience. It's wherever you have a front person, there's a conscience part of it. This is usually behind it, right? And I know this is sweeping generalizations, don't get all mad, but I'm trying to make a point here. But the will to fail would never allow you to meet your equal part in that scenario, because you will always be more comfortable, no matter how miserable or unhappy you are, no matter how much in someone else's shadow you are, no matter how unhappy you are in a work situation. You are comfortable in that scenario because your ego stays intact. You're still the king. You're still the queen of that dysfunctional family empire. But if you ever dared to go for your pot of gold, then that whole will to fail would have to dismantle itself, and so that's what the divine masculines are going through. It's detoxifying themselves and getting rid of whatever their BS was, especially because, you know, there's a difference between, like I said, like before, masculinity is not the same thing as divine masculinity, okay? Masculinity can be toxic and very all about, you know, small penis type of environment where it's all about power, power, power. Meanwhile, they have no power. Power is a rented thing that the divine gives you, and if you can't wield the sword with truth properly with it, then bye-bye to the power. It crumbles, right? Whereas the divine feminine has a better grasp on how to hold power, because they understand that it's not something that you want to hold on like an iron skillet. You don't want to grab it in the wrong way. You always want to make sure that you wield it judiciously. And so that's why there's a lot more spiritual empowerment to the divine feminine sometimes. But now the divine masculines are at this point where the pot of gold is right in front of them. And the question is, will their will to fail prevent them from stepping into their power and stepping out of the shadow and out of the legacy of someone else into their own kingdom, right? And so I thought that was a very interesting expression that would be, I think, a little bit more tangible for us as a collective to all agree on. We've all done it. I remember that remember how this whole thing with the spiritual leadership thing came up. The divine had asked me, like, I had been working with the divine for a very long time, and the whole pettiness thing between the spiritual leaders made me feel like I was in a sorority house, and I was like, I was in a fraternity. No, I'm not going to go to a sorority. And I let that will to fail prevent me, because what I did is that I allowed my ego to stay intact instead of just rising above it and calling people on their shit and just being, hey, knock it off. That took courage for someone who's a little bit more demure and a little bit quieter. I prefer to let my work do its own talk. But the thing is, if you can't boast about your own work, then who the hell is going to do it? So there was a will to fail there that was preventing me from stepping forward and just letting the cards fly out. Like, no, I'm a freak. Everybody knows I'm a freak. And I'm very proud of that, because it helped me realize that I can never truly fail. I've already succeeded. Everything that happens from here on out is already paid for. I've already done it myself. And on top of that, I got the karma from the family and all of that stuff coming at me too. So, but it took the fact that I had to dismantle the ego to look at the truth of my life and say, why didn't I write that book? And so I didn't just write one book, I wrote 3 books. And then I didn't just write one article, I wrote like 50 of them. And now all of them are coming true, and I'm referencing back to them, and all it did, it took the will to actually try. And the will to fail disappeared entirely, because now all I can do is succeed. That is the glory of pushing that envelope and saying, hey, you have something to say about it? Then it must be worth my time. Because the soul is here to help me evolve. That's what we're, the shadow of the soul. So if the soul wants us to keep trying and trying and trying and trying on something that has failed and failed and failed, then there's something that they're telling you is at the end of that. Don't ever let someone else talk you out of your glory. Don't ever let anybody else talk you out of your faith. Don't ever let anybody else talk you out of something, because that's part of the will to fail. You are disempowering yourself by listening to people who are not they don't have your best interest in mind. And you can always tell because at the end of the day, your truest friends, your allies, people who have your best interests will always tell you to try something risky, because they know that at the end, when it's all said and done, you won't have a regret. And if they're your friend, they're going to be there for you if it fails. But you can't grow or learn if you don't fail. That I've always said this, and it's not just me. I know that I think Natalie, Natalee, said it recently, because y'all know I love Natalie. And so she had made a comment about, there's a thing, we would never, and this is a shared thing between us, I'm not saying that we know each other or anything like that, but we both agree on this. I would never be with anybody who's a leader who has never failed. You know why? Because the first time that they fail, it's going to just unravel all, and I'm going to be like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? And so that's the only thing. But if you fail, and you're good at failing, then when you succeed, it's permanent. It's permanent. It's not going away, because you've learned. And your soul will reward you for such endeavors, and so will the divine, right? That's the whole point of this whole dismantling for the divine masculine right now, is that you know that you must be on the point of some sort of precipice that's about to blow up, and your life is about to change. And you're about to come into union with someone who has been through the exact same thing that you have, only in a different way. But it's the exact same storyline, and you know this. So don't let the will to fail prevent you from stepping into your happiness and your forevermore. Because if people are talking, if you know that they're going to give you shit about it, then you know that's the right thing for you to do. Not anything dangerous or stupid. Like, you don't want to do anything that's like going to put you in like danger of like getting killed or anything like that. That's irresponsible. But I'm talking about like when people have so much shit to say about someone else, then that person has a quality that they're lusting after. Because why would it matter? I've never looked at anybody else. I'll put it like this. Again, a me story, just so that we can all relate. I have never looked at another person and been jealous of them for whatever they have. Because I've always been self-aware enough to know that means that I lack that. Why does it matter what they are doing to my life? Does it matter to you if someone else is doing something? And they were successful at it. Why? Because, again, you don't have it. So if you don't try for it and don't attain that skill set or that goal because you were too afraid to stand in your power and in your own light, then how can you be mad that you live in the shadow of that person who did try it? And that's kind of the moral story here, is that when it comes down to the collective right now, we are at a reset point, and so there's nothing negative that they can do to you. This is about you branching out and showing yourself, warts and all. And because what it does is immediately that energy then attracts its equal part. But if you're living in fear, or you're in that will to fail, which is that predominant energy that a lot of us have to go through, especially right now, then you can never shine the brightest that you are. So you're never going to have that alpha connection. You're always going to have that lower ego expression where you feel more important, but you know that they're using you for your money, or that you know that they're using you for whatever XYZ that you can give them. Whereas the alpha does their own thing. The alpha and an alpha together are really powerful, because they're going to be judicious with their energy, but they will be the most loyal to each other. But you'll never get that alpha if you're only settling for betas or omegas. There's nothing wrong with a beta or omega, because betas have a very important purpose, and so do omegas. Everybody has their own thing. But what I'm saying, though, is if you are a beta and you want to become an alpha, then you need to strive for that energy. You can't just settle for being a beta. When you settle for whatever's around you, then you're stagnant. You're that little puddle of water. I mean, yeah, sure, a tadpole may grow from there, but eventually it becomes a frog and leaves the puddle. So everything in that is just like a petri dish of like eel. And then you can move on from that eel phase into something glorious if you're just willing to let go of that will to fail. And so what better way to explain what the ego death is? So as we've talked about, the ego death is one of the most uncomfortable things in the world because it's something that you've heavily been reliant on. It's really good in high school. It's really good in junior high. It's really good at the first level of college. It's even good sometimes. But like if you ever get into a fraternity up on up or a sorority on up, that ego is detrimental to your experience, right? Because immediately, if you show too much ego in either one of those scenarios, yeah, baby, I'm making up new words. It's my bootylicious. In those scenarios, then you're going to have a situation where they're not going to like you, and that's like a big that's foreboding in a fraternity or sorority. Although I will say honestly, you're going to like 2 to 3 people. If for you young people, you're going to befriend 2 to 3 people in your fraternity or sorority, and then you're going to hate the rest of them for the most part. But your family, so you love each other in the way that you stand up for your family, but you don't get along with everybody. But you also don't show ego because. Like, let's say you join, I don't want to name any of them, but let's say you're a beta or an alpha. Then you're surrounded by alphas and betas and omegas. So you see what I'm saying? So don't ever shoot yourself in the foot by being overly cocky, because what ends up doing is that the people that are at that level that are actually alphas don't show it. They're more quiet and they're more reserved. They already know that they're alphas. But when you're in a lower vibration, when you're allowing that whole will to fail, then you're relying on something that may be outdated for where you're at now, is what I'm saying, right? So let's move away from that, because I don't like talking, like, I don't judge anybody. So if you're in that situation, understand that it serves a purpose. All ego is important. But when it's a toxic ego, then you're relying on that to make yourself perfect, meaning that you're superior to everyone around you. And if you're trying to live in that environment, then you cast the biggest shadow. You are the biggest enemy to yourself, right? That's what I'm trying to say. But when you live in your own power, then you're a little bit more reserved about it. And when you are like that and you're secure in yourself, then you are willing to, let's say, go for that person that is out of your league. I don't think anybody's out of anybody's league. That's a stupid thing to say, but people believe it. Nobody's better than anybody on this world. I don't care if you're fucking Oprah Winfrey. You're not better than me, or you're not better than anybody else. You just are better in your own skin. And Oprah, like, that's one thing with powerful people that I personally have experience with, is that they are never pompous about it. They're always gracious about it. And they understand that it took them a lot to get there. And so that's what I'm seeing. They're looking for that energy connection where they see the person's value because of their truth. And when they hear the truth, they know it. But if you're in that will to fear thing, or the will to fear, if you're willing to fail constantly because it strokes your ego and you never are hurt, then you're going to feel it. It's like an empty shell of an existence at some point. Let's say that you're in a will to fail and you settled for a partner that's not the partner that you really wanted. You start to build resentment to someone who had no idea. Or if they did have an idea, they also settled. You see what I'm saying? So the will to fail prevented you both from true happiness, and now you're both unhappy. I'm not anybody out there, but I'm saying example. Now both parties are unhappy with their lives, even though they both chose to not try for anything else. They settled for whatever came their way. It's like the wind, like the leaf in the wind. So that's a big red danger zone, right? And so instead of talking down to you guys, I'm trying to relate to you on that level, because that just is a perfect phrase for what this whole experience is that most of you have gone through or are going through now, which is the demolition of the old toxic ego, where you are now able to stand in your own power and resonate with someone else in the world who's at that level with you and who's going to call you on your shit, and you're not going to be offended by it. They're going to always mean the best for you. And they're always going to have your back, no matter what. It can get violent, it can get not violent. These people are always going to make sure that they are your counterpart. But you'll never reach that if you settle for just mediocre. If you are, what's another example that a lot of people won't resonate and won't get triggered by? Let's say that there's a lot of nepotism. Okay, nepotism. So nepotism to me isn't that big of a deal, because at the end of the day, most companies now understand that even though something could be a nepotistic situation, they still have to do the job. So as long as they're prepared, I don't care if daddy got them the job. That's fine. I don't care how the money came to them. Old money is old money. Mama and grandma and grandpa and everybody worked their asses off to give you that money. So that's a blessing. But what do you now do with your blessing? Are you settling in that situation because it makes your ego feel better to know that you already came from something? Or are you going to make something of yourself? And see, that's where the differential is. That's where it's going to vary. Because a true kingdom is led by a king or a queen that has worked the field, or has failed, or has done their own work. Who am I going to use for an example? Oh, I use Anderson Cooper all the time, and I know he's probably, I don't know if he's ever going to see this, but sorry, Anderson, I'm going to use you again. Very well known family. Went out and made his own career, a very powerful career that he did of his own accord. That's a king. That's an emperor, actually. I'm going to say that's an emperor. And what does he do? He represents the people. He speaks for the people. He talks and asks questions that we need to hear. You see what I'm saying? So I'm just using him for that way. I know that everything's, but I don't care. He's the bomb. But that's what I mean by he didn't have the will to fail. He had the will to win. And so whatever he had in the past doesn't compare to what he has now, because he's standing in his own kingdom with his own empire, with his own kid, with his own life. And that's way better than if he had settled. If he had just been like, one of those rich kids that doesn't do anything with their life, even Paris Hilton is a perfect example of another lady, a young lady who was going down one path where she was like, that's hot, and all that stuff. I don't want to get all trademarked and stuff, but you know what I mean? And she was in that, and then all of a sudden she did this amazing business turn. And just now she's like a mogul. Like this girl, I think she has more money than her dad. Like she is just the shit. And she did it because she did something. She decided to not be in that, desire to fail. She wanted to succeed. And now she owns like all these hotels all over the place. I mean, she's like a tycoon. Who's the other one? Another one. Jessica Alba. Jessica Alba is one of those powerhouses. She's not only a very good actress, but she decided to monopolize on that and use the advantages with her voice to actually do something incredible as a business mogul, and she's taken off in that direction. That's what I mean about the energy that we're at right now, especially with divine masculines and divine feminines. That's who we're talking about. We're talking about people at that level who are coming into union. But as long as we have that will to fail, then we're never going to try, because if you look your nose down at somebody, you never know if that somebody is your partner. Remember, Jesus scrubbed feet. I'm just going to say that right now. Nobody knew that Jesus was Jesus. Okay, I don't know who said that, but no, I'm not a crazy man. I'm saying that you never know who someone is until you talk to them. If you have a will to fail, then you never try to branch out and look at different avenues of possibilities because you're comfortable in stagnation. But if you open yourself up to talk to other people, then you might meet Jesus, or you might meet Mary Magdalene, or you might meet XYZ. I'm a spiritual person, so I went with what came to mind, okay? Give me a break. But at the end of the day, understand what I'm saying. Like, that's the power to getting rid of the will to fail. And so that's such a powerful statement to make to a lot of people. And I just want you guys, especially divine masculines, to know whatever the fear is, whatever the will to fail is, whatever it is that's keeping you small, if someone else is talking to you and telling you that that's not the right choice for you, then look at that person. But look at yourself internally and say, wait a minute, if I don't try this, if I don't do this, am I going to regret this? Even in the smallest part. Because when you get to the pearly gates, not everybody gets to do a do-over. Am I getting a second chance here? Is there such a flare-up with everybody else and their big bag of bullshit around me because they know that this party or this organization or this business or the structure that I'm building will dismantle their way of life that they've been leeching off of me? Is that the root cause? Because that'll be a nice indication for you to go, okay, I'm going to go do this. This needs to change. I'm not doing this anymore. But you won't know that unless you dismantle the will to fail. Try something different. Go out there. Make an ass of yourself. The worst that can happen is you make more money because you did it. Because no matter how many times you fail, it is inevitable that you will succeed if you're in alignment with your true self. And when you are willing to try over and over again, then the fates give you exactly what you asked for because you worked for it. It may not look the same way that you thought it was. Like, I'm experiencing that right now. But it's worth it. Don't settle for the will to fail. Settle for the will to succeed. You have the will of God. You are a reflection of that energy. So I just wanted to say that, and I hope that everybody gets the resonance of how important I thought the message was. I hope you guys have a great night. That's it for tonight. There's going to be a big thing coming out, an article and a video that goes with it, and I'm going to do it in tandem. Yeah, baby. All right, bye.